In January of 1595, Sultan Mehmed III arrived at Topkapi Palace to inherit an empire and ordered his 19 half-brothers strangled. None had rebelled, yet each possessed the one thing Ottoman rulers feared most, a legitimate claim to the throne. Their deaths were meant to guarantee peace. Instead, they exposed the dynasty's central paradox. Could a family survive for centuries by treating its own blood as a mortal threat? If you appreciate history told through evidence and careful research, subscribe for more stories like this. In the Ottoman camp on the Kosovo plain in the summer of 1389, military victory produced an immediate crisis. Sultan Murad I was dead. Accounts disagree over whether a Serbian attacker killed him during the fighting or reached him after the battle, but the political danger is clear. Two of Murad's adult sons, Bayezid and Yaqub, had commanded troops in the campaign. Both possessed royal blood, military experience, and supporters. No binding rule declared which one must inherit. Later Ottoman chroniclers reported that Bayezid acted before Yaqub could organize a challenge. Yaqub was summoned and strangled, leaving Bayezid as the only surviving candidate in the camp. Christian and Ottoman traditions differ over the timing and circumstances, and the surviving evidence cannot reconstruct every moment with certainty. What is not seriously disputed is the result. Murad died at Kosovo, Yaqub did not survive the succession, and the leading commanders recognized Bayezid as the new ruler. The decision was not created by a single battle. Its roots reached back to the uncertain beginnings of the Ottoman house. Around 1300, Osman was one among several Turkish frontier lords, known as beys, competing in northwestern Anatolia, in what is now Turkey. The year 1299 is commonly treated as the dynasty's foundation, but no contemporary document records a formal declaration. Early Ottoman history was written down much later, after modest frontier victories had become the opening chapters of an imperial legend. Osman's following grew through warfare, alliances, negotiation, and the attraction of new warriors to a successful leader. His territory faced weakened Byzantine lands, but it also bordered rival Turkish principalities. Victory brought booty, land, and prestige. It could also be interpreted as evidence that fortune and divine favor rested on the ruler. These qualities mattered because the early dynasty possessed no ancient imperial title and no universally accepted pedigree that placed it automatically above every competitor. Osman's son Orhan captured Bursa in 1326 and made it the center of an expanding state. Coins issued in Orhan's name provide firmer evidence of independent sovereignty than the later legends surrounding Osman. Ottoman forces then crossed into southeastern Europe and established themselves in the Balkans. Within a few generations, a frontier household had acquired cities, taxes, soldiers, and subjects of several religions. Yet its rapid growth did not produce a fixed law of succession. In many European kingdoms, preference for the eldest son was becoming an important principle, although primogeniture was neither universal nor free from conflict. Early Ottoman practice followed a different political logic. Sovereignty belonged to the ruling house, while the identity of the next sovereign remained open. A ruler could favor one son, but that preference did not automatically erase the claims of the others. Seniority, maternal background, and age could matter, but none provided an unbreakable rule. An Ottoman prince was also more than a possible heir waiting inside a palace. Princes received commands, districts, households, advisors, and armed followers. These responsibilities trained them to govern and fight, but they also gave each prince the beginnings of an independent power base. His servants expected advancement if he succeeded and dismissal or death if he failed. When a ruler died, the competition therefore involved commanders, officials, soldiers, and provincial interests as well as members of one family. Murad I had experienced this danger before Kosovo. His elder brother Suleiman had died before their father Orhan, clearing Murad's path but not making his succession automatic. Later Ottoman accounts state that two other brothers, Halil and Ibrahim, resisted Murad and were executed after their revolt. The evidence for these early events is incomplete, Yet the pattern is important. A prince who opposed the reigning ruler could be treated not simply as a disobedient relative, but as the center of an alternative political order. At Kosovo, that logic moved one step further. Yaqub was not recorded as leading a rebellion when Bayezid ordered his death. His danger came from what he might do once Murad's death became known. If separate groups acclaimed separate brothers, the army could divide before it left the battlefield. Bayezid's speed transformed a disputed claim into an accomplished succession. The execution was a political act intended to prevent competition, not the result of a written law requiring every new sultan to kill his brothers. The early Ottoman throne therefore did not pass automatically to the oldest son. It went to the prince who could secure the dynasty's center, win recognition from powerful men, and prevent another claimant from doing the same. Under these conditions, a living brother with followers was not merely a member of the royal family. He was a possible rival court, army, and government. Bayezid's elimination of Yaqub may have prevented an immediate struggle in 1389, but it established no dependable succession rule. Bayezid himself raised several sons who acquired military experience and political supporters. In 1402, when the conqueror Timur defeated and captured him at Ankara, those sons survived and no single candidate could remove the others quickly. The violence avoided at Kosovo would return as a civil war lasting 11 years. In late July of 1402, the army of Sultan Bayezid I met the forces of Timur outside Ankara. Bayezid had built a centralized state stretching across Anatolia and southeastern Europe. By the end of the battle, that structure had lost its ruler and much of its army. Bayezid was captured alive. Several sons escaped, each carrying enough dynastic legitimacy to present himself as the rightful heir. Timur did not appoint one of them to govern the entire Ottoman realm. Instead, he restored Turkish principalities that Bayezid had absorbed and allowed competing princes to control separate territories. Bayezid died in captivity in early 1403. Without a recognized successor, his government divided into courts that collected revenue, negotiated treaties, and raised armies against one another. The oldest surviving son, Suleiman, established himself at Edirne and controlled most Ottoman lands in the Balkans. Isa held Bursa and parts of northwestern Anatolia. Mehmed ruled from Amasya farther east. Musa, who had also fallen into Timurid hands, was eventually released into Mehmed's custody. Each brother claimed to embody the dynasty and could reward the officials, frontier lords, and foreign rulers who supported him. The Byzantine Empire, Serbia, Wallachia, and Venice did not stand outside the contest. They used it to recover territory, reduce tribute, or weaken a prince who appeared too powerful. Suleiman moved first to secure his European position. In 1403, he concluded a treaty at Gallipoli that granted major concessions to the Byzantines and other Christian powers. It bought recognition and peace, but showed how much a prince would surrender to keep his brothers from crossing between Europe and Asia. In Anatolia, Mehmed defeated Isa and gained Bursa. Isa attempted to recover with help from other Turkish rulers, but his support failed and he was killed. Suleiman then crossed from Europe, occupied Bursa and Ankara, and forced Mehmed back toward Amasya. A prince dominant in Anatolia could still be challenged from the Balkans, while control of the straits depended on cooperation from Constantinople or nearby fleets. Mehmed answered by helping Musa enter the European provinces. Musa attracted frontier commanders and received support from Wallachia. His campaign compelled Suleiman to abandon Anatolia and return to Edirne. In 1411, Suleiman's following collapsed as Musa advanced. Suleiman was killed while attempting to escape, but the brother who replaced him did not inherit unquestioned loyalty. Musa's harsh treatment of former supporters and his pressure on Serbia and Byzantium created a new coalition against him. Emperor Manuel II now assisted Mehmed, just as Byzantine diplomacy had previously assisted Suleiman. Byzantine ships helped Mehmed cross into Europe, while Serbian forces and dissatisfied Ottoman commanders joined his cause. After several attempts, Mehmed defeated Musa near Sofia at the Battle of Çamurlu in July of 1413. Musa was captured and killed. 11 years after Ankara, one son of Bayezid finally ruled both the Anatolian and European centers of the Ottoman state. The civil war revealed succession was not a private family dispute. Every prince became the center of a coalition. Ottoman soldiers chose among them. Turkish principalities defended their independence. Serbian and Wallachian rulers changed sides. The Byzantine government controlled crossings, sheltered claimants, and exchanged recognition for territory. A living prince could sustain a rival government even after losing his original army. Mehmed I presented himself as the reunifier of the Ottoman realm. He restored central authority, recovered territory, and rebuilt relationships damaged by the war. Yet his victory did not erase every claimant. Another son of Bayezid, Mustafa, had disappeared after Ankara and later returned. Ottoman writers, loyal to Mustafa's enemies, called him an impostor, but surviving evidence supports the conclusion that he was probably a genuine member of the dynasty. Mustafa challenged Mehmed in 1415 and 1416 with support from regional powers and discontented commanders. After his defeat, he took refuge in Byzantine territory. The imperial government kept him under guard, reportedly in return for payments from Mehmed. He remained valuable because he could be released whenever Constantinople needed leverage against the Ottoman court. That moment arrived after Mehmed died in 1421. The Byzantines released Mustafa to challenge Mehmed's young son, Murad II. Mustafa gained extensive support in the European provinces and briefly ruled from Edirne before crossing into Anatolia. His coalition then disintegrated. Murad captured and executed him in 1422. A separate revolt by Murad's younger brother soon proved that even the defeat of one claimant did not end the succession problem. Murad eventually stabilized the state and briefly transferred the throne to his son Mehmed in 1444. Military and political pressure brought Murad back 2 years later, showing again that accession alone did not make authority secure. When Murad died in 1451, Mehmed returned to the throne with the memory of Ankara embedded in Ottoman political culture. Mehmed I had reunited the dynasty by defeating his brothers. His grandson would seek a rule that allowed the victor to prevent such a war before it began. When Murad II died in 1451, news reached his son Mehmed in the provincial capital of Manisa. Mehmed hurried to Edirne and took the throne for the second time shortly before his 19th birthday. One possible rival remained inside the dynasty. Murad had left an infant son, usually identified in later accounts as Prince Ahmed. Those accounts state that the child was killed soon after Mehmed arrived, although they differ over his age, the method, and the people responsible. No surviving order in Mehmed's own hand explains the death. Some narratives describe strangulation, while others describe drowning. The limited and sometimes contradictory evidence makes the precise scene impossible to recover. Even so, the episode fits an established political pattern. Ahmed had not rebelled and was too young to command supporters. His danger rested entirely in the possibility that officials might preserve him and use his dynastic identity against Mehmed in the future. Mehmed's second reign transformed the scale of that problem. On May 29, 1453, his army captured Constantinople and ended the Byzantine Empire. The city became the center of an Ottoman state that claimed authority far beyond the frontier principality founded by Osman. Mehmed rebuilt and repopulated the capital, expanded the palace administration, and presented himself not merely as a successful war leader, but as an imperial sovereign. Centralization accompanied conquest. Soon after Constantinople fell, Mehmed ordered the execution of Grand Vizier Chandarli Halil Pasha, a member of an old and powerful Turkish political family. The Sultan increasingly relied on administrators and commanders whose position depended on the imperial household. He also regulated taxation, land, criminal penalties, court offices, salaries, and ceremony. These measures strengthened the idea that government flowed from one sovereign center, rather than from a partnership among autonomous lords. The surviving text, commonly called the Law Code of the House of Osman, belongs to this larger effort. It was not a constitution in the modern sense. It brought together rules about the palace, senior officials, government practice, and the dynasty itself. Ottoman government operated through Islamic law interpreted by judges and scholars, but also through regulations issued under the authority of the Sultan. These sultanic regulations were known as Kanun and addressed matters that inherited legal books did not settle in sufficient detail. One clause became more famous than all the others. It declared that whichever of Mehmed's descendants attained the sultanate could put his brothers to death for the sake of public order. The text added that most members of the learned religious establishment considered the act permissible. Its central phrase was Nizam-i-Alam, meaning the order of the world. In political use, it referred to protecting the state and its subjects from sedition, civil war, and the destruction that rival claimants might cause. The reasoning drew strength from recent Ottoman experience. The sons of Bayezid I had divided the realm for 11 years. Mustafa had later been released by the Byzantines to challenge Murad II. A prince did not need to begin as a rebel to become one. As long as he remained alive, soldiers, foreign courts, or dissatisfied officials could place him at the center of an opposition movement. The clause attempted to destroy that possibility before it developed into open war. Yet this created a serious legal and moral distinction. Executing a prince who had raised an army could be presented as punishment for rebellion. Killing a brother who had committed no hostile act was preventive execution. The claim that future disorder justified present death was never free from controversy. Ottoman legal writers and later historians offered different explanations, and modern scholars continue to dispute whether such a precaution could be reconciled with the presumption that an innocent person should not be punished for an imagined crime. There is also uncertainty about the surviving law code itself. The manuscripts were copied and organized after Mehmed's lifetime, and some passages contain elements that appear to reflect later institutions. Historians therefore debate when the text reached its surviving form. Some accept the Fratricide clause as substantially Mehmed's policy. Others argue that it may have been edited or inserted later. Even scholars who question its exact date generally recognize that it expressed a practice already associated with Ottoman succession. The wording also matters. The clause offered strong dynastic authorization, but it did not state that every new sultan must automatically kill every brother. It described the act as appropriate for public order and claimed scholarly permission. Whether it was used depended on the ruler, the political circumstances, the number and age of possible rivals, and the strength of their supporters. Mehmed did not invent dynastic killing. His reign gave it an imperial language and connected it to the survival of the state. When Mehmed died in 1481, that language faced its first great test. His adult sons Bayezid and Sem governed separate provinces and possessed their own households, advisors, and military connections. Neither could rely on age alone, and the law code did not name an heir. It could justify the victor's elimination of a rival, but it could not decide who would reach the center of power first. Mehmed had built an empire that was not meant to be divided. His sons would now fight over which of them had the right to keep it whole. On May 3, 1481, Mehmed II died near Gebze while leading his army east from Constantinople. The destination of his final campaign remains uncertain, but the immediate danger was clear. Bayezid governed at Amasya, while Sem held authority in Karaman. Because Ottoman law named no automatic heir, the first prince to command the capital, the army, and the government would possess a decisive advantage. The court tried to control the news while messengers rode toward both brothers. Grand Vizier Karamani Mehmed Pasha, the chief minister, attempted to manage the succession. Accounts differ over whether he actively favored Sem, but the race did not remain secret. The Janissaries, the Sultan's salaried infantry, learned that Mehmed was dead. They entered Constantinople in revolt and killed the Grand Vizier. Officials then placed Bayezid's young son Korkut on the throne as his father's temporary representative. This was a political measure that held the center until Bayezid arrived. The Janissaries and leading officials had helped decide the succession before the brothers could meet. Sem did not accept that decision. Advancing from central Anatolia, he defeated a force sent against him and entered Bursa, the dynasty's first major capital. The sermon at Friday prayer was delivered in his name, and coins were struck as signs of sovereignty. For a brief period, the empire had two men acting as sultan. Sem possessed territory, troops, and a dynastic claim equal in blood to his brothers. Bayezid possessed Constantinople and the military establishment. Legitimacy followed control as much as seniority. Ottoman narratives report that Sem proposed dividing the empire, leaving Bayezid the European provinces while he ruled Anatolia. The exact circumstances cannot be independently established, but Bayezid rejected partition. A sultanate divided between brothers would invite rival courts, armies, and foreign intervention. In June of 1481, Bayezid's forces defeated Sem near Yenishehir. Sem fled into the Mamluk Sultanate, which ruled Egypt and Syria. Bayezid had won the battlefield and the capital, but not captured the rival whose name could attract discontented subjects. In Cairo, Sem received protection and made a pilgrimage to Mecca. He returned to Anatolia in 1482 with supporters connected to the dispossessed Karamanid house. The campaign failed. Sem then sought passage through Rhodes, hoping the Knights Hospitaller, a Christian military order based there, would help him travel onward. He arrived as a refugee, but soon became a valuable prisoner. Grand Master Pierre d'Aubusson understood that custody of an Ottoman prince could be exchanged for money and influence. Bayezid negotiated with the knights and agreed to make large annual payments while Sem remained outside Ottoman territory. The arrangement transferred the danger into foreign hands. Sem was taken from Rhodes to France and held at guarded residences. His movements were controlled, and European rulers competed for access to him. The prince no longer commanded an army, yet his captors could threaten to release him beside one. A campaign presented as Sem's restoration might attract Ottoman defectors, while making a Christian invasion appear to be a dynastic intervention. Hungarian, French, Papal, and Neapolitan courts considered how his claim might serve them. In 1489, Sem was transferred to Rome under Pope Innocent VIII. Plans for a crusade gave his presence special value. Bayezid responded with envoys, gifts, intelligence, and payments intended to keep him confined. The Pope could pressure the Sultan without marching an army, while Bayezid had to treat Sem's jailers as diplomatic partners. Sem was held by Europeans, but Ottoman policy was partly held by the possibility that they might use him. This constraint helps explain the caution of Bayezid's early reign. It did not prevent every war or territorial gain, and Ottoman decisions had many causes. Yet historians identify Sem's captivity as an important reason expansion slowed, especially where a Western coalition might place him at its head. A foreign army accompanied by an Ottoman claimant posed a special threat because invasion and civil war could reinforce each other. That possibility survived until King Charles VIII of France invaded Italy. In early 1495, he took custody of Sem and carried him south, apparently for plans against the Ottoman Empire. Within weeks, Sem fell ill and died near Naples. Later reports accused Bayezid, the Pope, or their agents of arranging poison. No surviving evidence proves those accusations, and the precise cause remains uncertain. Sem died in foreign custody after nearly 13 years under Christian control. His death removed the alternative sultan, whom Bayezid's enemies might restore. Sem's career answered the question left by Yenishehir. Exile did not end a succession struggle when foreign powers could preserve a prince's claim. For 14 years, Bayezid ruled while his defeated brother influenced diplomacy from guarded courts beyond Ottoman borders. Bayezid's son Selim inherited a severe lesson. A dynastic rival could remain dangerous without territory, troops, or freedom, and the next generation would be far less willing to leave that danger alive. In 1511, the Shakulu uprising spread across southwestern Anatolia, exposing the fragility of Bayezid II's final years. Shakulu led armed followers connected to the Kizilbash religious movement, whose members recognized the spiritual authority of Shah Ismail, ruler of Safavid Iran. The revolt was not simply a foreign invasion. It grew from religious loyalties, local grievances, and resistance to Ottoman officials. Yet its Safavid associations made it both a domestic rebellion and an imperial security crisis. Bayezid was aging, and 3 surviving sons had built competing networks. Ahmed, governor of Amasya, enjoyed support among senior officials and appeared to be his father's preferred successor. Korkut, a respected scholar with court connections, governed in western Anatolia but lacked a comparable military following. Selim, stationed at Trabzon on the northeastern frontier, cultivated an image of aggressive leadership against the Safavids. Each brother had soldiers, administrators, and allies. The succession was dividing the state before the throne became vacant. Shakulu's forces defeated several Ottoman commanders before the rebellion was broken. Grand Vizier Hadim Ali Pasha died in the fighting, depriving Ahmed of a powerful supporter. The crisis damaged confidence in the government and made military ability central to the succession. Selim presented himself as the prince most prepared to confront Shah Ismail. That claim later supported an official image of him as the empire's inevitable defender. His actual path to power remained uncertain, and his first open bid ended in defeat. Selim challenged his father in Rumelia during 1511. Bayezid's army defeated him near Korlu, forcing him toward the Crimean Khanate, where he had family connections. Ahmed then moved toward Constantinople, expecting the court to secure his accession. The Janissaries refused to accept him. They distrusted his supporters, questioned his military leadership, and feared for their own position. Korkut also sought support in the capital, but could not build a decisive coalition. The infantry had rejected the court's leading candidate without possessing any legal right to choose a sultan. Selim returned with the advantage that mattered most. The Janissaries backed him as the prince most likely to lead an eastern war and protect their interests. Under military and political pressure, Bayezid abdicated in April of 1512. Selim became sultan despite having rebelled and lost only months earlier. His accession demonstrated that an Ottoman succession depended not merely on birth or provincial command, but on winning the institutions that controlled the capital. Bayezid left Constantinople for retirement and died during the journey the following month. Some Ottoman and European accounts alleged poisoning, and later writers suspected Selim or his agents. Historians remain divided. Bayezid was elderly and unwell, while surviving evidence does not conclusively identify poison, an order, or an agent. His death removed one possible center of resistance, but Selim still faced 2 brothers with recognized claims and political networks. Ahmed continued the struggle from Anatolia, gathering forces and claiming rightful rule. In 1513, Selim defeated him near Yenishehir. Ahmed was captured and strangled, ending the strongest organized challenge. Korkut had initially submitted, but Selim did not consider submission sufficient. Ottoman narratives report that agents sent Korkut letters inviting him to claim the throne. Whatever the design of that correspondence, Selim moved against him. Korkut fled, was discovered, and was strangled. The purge extended beyond Selim's brothers. He ordered the deaths of several nephews whose descent from Bayezid gave them potential claims, while other princes escaped toward Safavid or Mamluk territory. The motives assigned to individual victims by later chronicles require caution, but the pattern is clear. Selim was not merely punishing rebellion. He was removing men who might become the focus of a faction or foreign intervention. By 1514, the most accessible alternative claimants had been eliminated. With the succession secured, Selim could campaign east without leaving a brother behind as a rival government. At Chaldiran in 1514, Ottoman firearms and infantry helped defeat Shah Ismail. Selim briefly occupied Tabriz but could not destroy the Safavid state. His campaign was accompanied by harsh measures against suspected Kizilbash sympathizers in Anatolia. Later chronicles give large totals for those killed or displaced, but the numbers remain disputed. Selim then turned south. Victories over the Mamluk Sultanate at Marj Dabik in 1516 and Ridania in 1517 brought Syria and Egypt under Ottoman rule, while the Sharif of Mecca recognized Ottoman supremacy. These conquests transformed the empire's scale and wealth. Dynastic security did not cause them, but the absence of a surviving brother allowed Selim to campaign far from Constantinople without facing the danger that had constrained Bayezid while Sem lived. When Selim died near Korlu in September of 1520, his only surviving son, Suleiman, inherited the throne without a brother to challenge him. Fratricide had delivered what its defenders promised, an undisputed succession and armies directed outward. It also revealed a deeper change. The Janissaries had helped depose one sultan, reject one prince, and elevate another, turning family rivalry into a contest among armed state factions. Selim left Suleiman a single heir's path to power. Suleiman's sons would not receive the same protection from one another. When Suleiman the Magnificent became sultan in 1520, he inherited unusual safety within his own generation. Selim I had left no surviving brother, uncle, or adult cousin capable of an immediate challenge. Suleiman entered Constantinople without ordering a dynastic execution. No rival prince controlled another province, and no civil war interrupted the transfer. The system had produced a peaceful accession, but Suleiman would not pass the same inheritance to his sons. Ottoman princes were sent to govern provinces, accompanied by their mothers, tutors, servants, administrators, and troops. A prince learned government while creating a household that could become a future court. His mother protected his interests and cultivated alliances. Location mattered because the first claimant to reach Constantinople, after the Sultan's death, might control the treasury and army. Training several qualified sons prepared the empire for succession, while simultaneously preparing several rival governments. Mustafa, Suleiman's eldest surviving son, was born to Mahidevran, who accompanied him through his provincial career. Hurrem Sultan, Suleiman's legal wife and an exceptional court presence, remained near the imperial center while protecting several sons, including Mehmed, Selim, Bayezid, and Cihangir. Mehmed was favored but died from illness in 1543. Cihangir lived with serious physical disability and never developed his brother's provincial military base. Mustafa governed Manisa and later Amasya, acquiring experience, a reputation for generosity, and strong popularity among soldiers. That popularity became dangerous while Suleiman lived. Foreign diplomats and Ottoman observers described Mustafa as the preferred successor of many Janissaries. When the Sultan was ill, soldiers discussed what might happen if he died on campaign. Some accounts suggest Mustafa prepared to move rapidly if such news arrived. A report reaching Suleiman could be intelligence, rumor, or advocacy for another prince. That preparation was rational under the Ottoman system, but it could appear indistinguishable from readiness to seize power. Surviving evidence does not prove that Mustafa had begun an open rebellion. On October 6, 1553, Suleiman's army was camped near Eregli in central Anatolia during a campaign against Safavid Iran. Mustafa was ordered to bring his forces to the imperial camp. He reportedly received warnings that entering was dangerous. Refusing the summons, however, would confirm suspicions of disobedience. Mustafa arrived, left his weapons outside the imperial tent, and entered. Executioners seized and strangled him. Contemporary reports support that sequence, although the dramatic words and gestures later attributed to those present remain uncertain. Hurrem Sultan and Grand Vizier Rustam Pasha had reasons to fear Mustafa's accession. If he became sultan, Hurrem's sons faced death, while Rustam's position depended upon her family's political household. Later chronicles accused them of fabricating evidence that Mustafa had contacted Shah Tahmasp or planned to overthrow his father. Intrigue formed part of the struggle, but surviving documentation does not prove that familiar story in full. The final command belonged to Suleiman, who faced a prince attracting loyalty that might otherwise have belonged to the reigning sultan. The execution brought the army close to revolt. Janissaries mourned Mustafa and blamed Rustam, whom Suleiman removed from the Grand Vizierate. Poets composed elegies condemning the death and the alleged intrigue behind it. Rustam returned 2 years later, suggesting that his dismissal partly calmed the soldiers rather than punished proven deception. Mustafa's young son was also executed, preventing another claim. Cihangir died shortly after his half-brother. Later tradition attributed his death to grief, but his chronic illness prevents that explanation from being established. With Mustafa, Mehmed, and Cihangir dead, the succession narrowed to Selim and Bayezid. Hurrem may have restrained their competition, but after her death in 1558, rivalry became open. Suleiman reassigned both princes to new provincial commands. Bayezid resisted and gathered armed supporters, while Selim secured his father's backing. In 1559, their armies fought near Konya. Selim's forces, reinforced by Suleiman's troops, defeated Bayezid and transformed a succession rivalry into declared rebellion. Bayezid fled with 4 sons and sought Shah Tahmasp's protection. As Sem Sultan had shown, a prince across the border remained a political weapon. The Safavid ruler welcomed Bayezid but negotiated with Suleiman and Selim. The dispute threatened peace and gave Shah Tahmasp leverage over both Ottoman factions. After prolonged bargaining and a substantial Ottoman payment, he surrendered the fugitives to Ottoman agents. In 1561, Bayezid and his 4 accompanying sons were strangled. A surviving son in Ottoman territory was also killed. Suleiman never formally named Selim crown prince. Through the executions of Mustafa, Mustafa's son, Bayezid, and Bayezid's sons, he instead removed every accessible male alternative. When Suleiman died on campaign in 1566, Selim inherited without opposition from a brother. The system had moved beyond allowing a victor to kill rivals after accession. It encouraged a reigning father to interpret popularity, military preparation, or resistance as the beginning of future civil war. This was the system's deepest human cost. Every prince needed supporters to survive, but attracting them made him dangerous to his father and brothers. Suleiman secured a peaceful transfer by choosing the survivor before his own death. The underlying rule remained unchanged. Several sons meant several possible governments. His successors would keep princes closer to the center, then wait until accession to eliminate every rival in a single night. In December of 1574, Murad III reached Istanbul from his provincial government at Manisa and claimed his father's throne. His first command secured the new reign. 5 younger brothers were strangled inside the palace. None had raised an army or declared rebellion. Their dynastic identity was the offense that mattered. Suleiman had eliminated rival sons over many years, but Murad returned fratricide to the moment of accession, when fear and authority were concentrated. Murad's mother, Nurbanu Sultan, became the powerful queen mother and remained a central court broker until her death in 1583. Safi Sultan, Murad's favored consort and Prince Mehmed's mother, built influence within the same palace world. They did not control every decision, but succession politics was changing location. Mothers, princes, eunuchs, ministers, and officers increasingly competed near the imperial center. Meanwhile, Murad fathered an exceptionally large family, including the 19 younger sons who survived him. Prince Mehmed still followed the older path. After his circumcision, he was sent to govern Manisa in 1583. There he acquired a household administrators and experience away from the capital. He became the final Ottoman Sultan to reach the throne after serving as a provincial governor. His younger half-brothers remained inside the palace. This was not yet announced as a permanent reform, but it prevented them from building independent provincial households. The field was unequal. One adult prince possessed a provincial court, while many younger princes possessed the same blood claim but no opportunity to govern. Murad died in January of 1595, while the empire fought the Habsburg monarchy. His death was concealed while word traveled to Manisa and Mehmed hurried to Istanbul. After assuming power, he ordered all 19 half-brothers executed. They had no provincial armies, public offices, or established political households of their own. Palace executioners strangled them according to a method that avoided shedding royal blood. Most, perhaps all, were minors. Evidence indicates that even the eldest was probably no more than 11 years old. The difference from earlier succession struggles was fundamental. Sem Sultan had commanded troops and governed territory. Ahmed and Korkut had political networks. Mustafa and Bayezid had become centers of military competition. Mehmed's brothers had done none of those things. Studies confirm that neither Murad's 5 brothers nor Mehmed's 19 had rebelled. The executions treated the possibility of future opposition as sufficient reason for death, without requiring an act of treason. Ottoman chronicler Saloniki Mustafa Efendi recorded grief surrounding the deaths, while foreign observers also treated the event as exceptional. The funeral procession made the cost visible. 19 small bodies followed their father toward burial, while the new sultan occupied the palace alone. The law could present the killings as protection of public order, but the victims' youth exposed the distance between an imagined civil war and the people condemned. Mehmed, nevertheless, faced a genuine crisis. War against the Habsburgs demanded money, soldiers, and visible leadership. In 1596, he led the imperial army, captured Eger, and was present at the Ottoman victory at Mazucarests. Yet killing his brothers did not stabilize the empire. Military unrest continued in the capital, while fiscal pressure, demobilized soldiers, provincial abuses, and rebellion contributed to expanding violence in Anatolia. In January of 1603, mutinous troops even forced the government to surrender senior palace officials for execution. Eliminating 19 princes also failed to end court factionalism. Safai Sultan, now the Queen Mother, exercised influence through servants, officials, and patronage. Ministers rose and fell, military corps intervened, and rivals gathered around Mehmed's surviving sons. Fratricide had removed one category of opponent, but not competition for access to the Sultan. Ambition shifted toward new households and younger candidates. Prince Mahmud, one of Mehmed's sons, became the next focus of suspicion. Eager for military responsibility, he reportedly asked to command forces against rebels and foreign enemies. That request could show ability or an attempt to win the army. In 1603, palace authorities intercepted communications between Mahmud's mother and a religious seer concerning the Sultan's future. Contemporary accounts report that the prediction gave Mehmed only a short time on the throne. Rumors also claimed Mahmud might replace his father, but surviving evidence does not establish an organized coup. Mehmed ordered Mahmud questioned and executed in June of 1603. The prince was strangled inside the palace, as the 19 brothers had been 8 years earlier. No conclusive evidence shows that Mahmud organized the intercepted inquiry. Preventive killing no longer waited for a vacant throne. A popular or impatient son surrounded by predictions of succession could become a present danger. Safi Sultan and other palace figures were accused of encouraging Mehmed's fear, but the order belonged to the reigning sultan. When Mehmed died in December of 1603, the male dynasty had reached a dangerous minimum. His successor Ahmed was 13, had never governed a province, and had no son. Ahmed's only surviving brother, the young Mustafa, was both his sole rival and the House of Osman's only immediate reserve. If Ahmed died childless after killing him, the direct male line could end. 19 executions had protected Mehmed without creating order in the army, provinces, or palace. Ahmed had to decide whether killing the last alternative heir would secure his throne or place the dynasty one illness away from extinction. Ahmed I was 13 when he became sultan in 1603. By the precedent of Murad III and Mehmed III, his younger brother Mustafa should have been strangled. Ahmed gave no such order. Mustafa remained alive inside the palace, separated from public power. The decision challenged the logic that had killed 19 princes, but it began without a law, a declaration of mercy, or an agreed new system of succession. The House of Osman was dangerously small. Ahmed had no child, had never governed a province, and had not demonstrated that he could produce heirs. Illness could remove either boy. Handan Sultan, Ahmed's mother, helped guide the early court, while officials understood that killing Mustafa would leave the dynasty dependent upon Ahmed alone. Mustafa's survival was therefore connected to dynastic necessity. Compassion may have mattered, but surviving evidence does not identify it as the decisive cause. Ahmed eventually fathered several sons, many through his influential consort Kosum Sultan, yet Mustafa continued to live. The exception outlasted the emergency that created it. Meanwhile, provincial apprenticeship disappeared. Princes no longer governed Manisa or Amasya with independent households. They remained inside the palace under varying supervision. These guarded apartments and the wider practice of princely confinement gradually became known as the kaifs, meaning the cage. It was not always one literal cell, and the severity of confinement changed between reigns. When Ahmed died in 1617, the court faced an unprecedented choice. His eldest son Osman was about 13, while Mustafa was the dynasty's oldest living man. A coalition of officials secured Mustafa's accession. Choosing Osman could also have placed the surviving uncle under renewed pressure for execution. For the first time in Ottoman imperial history, a brother succeeded a reigning sultan. No permanent statute established seniority, but the decision created a powerful precedent. The throne could pass to the oldest eligible male instead of remaining within the dead ruler's immediate household. Mustafa's conduct soon convinced officials that he could not govern effectively. Whether his condition began in childhood or worsened through fear and confinement cannot be answered with certainty. He was deposed in 1618, and Osman II took the throne. A living prince had provided a replacement, but ministers, soldiers, jurists, and palace factions now exercised greater influence over which dynastic male ruled. Fratricide had not disappeared. Before campaigning against the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth in 1621, Osman ordered the execution of his half-brother Mehmed, a son of Kosum Sultan. The chief religious jurist reportedly resisted approval, but another judicial opinion supported the sentence. Mehmed had not raised an army. Osman feared leaving an alternative sultan behind while he campaigned. The old preventive logic survived inside the new system whenever a brother's existence appeared dangerous. Osman returned from an unsuccessful campaign, determined to strengthen his authority over the military. In May of 1622, Janissaries and other opponents rebelled, deposed him, and restored Mustafa. Osman was imprisoned and killed, an unprecedented regicide that provoked outrage and further resistance. Preserving princes did more than give the dynasty reserves. It gave dissatisfied factions another Ottoman around whom they could organize. Mustafa's second reign ended in 1623, when he was deposed again, and Ahmed's young son Murad became sultan. Murad IV was 11, so his mother, Kosum Sultan, exercised substantial authority during his early reign. As Murad matured, he asserted personal control and returned to preventive execution. His brothers Bayezid and Suleiman were killed in 1635, and Qasim followed in 1638. The orders came amid military campaigns and fears that a brother might be proclaimed during Murad's absence. The youngest brother, Ibrahim, remained confined but alive. Because Murad lacked a surviving son, Ibrahim was again the dynasty's necessary reserve. When Murad died without a surviving son in 1640, Ibrahim was the only remaining Ottoman male. His accession proved the value of Ahmed's decision decades earlier. Without a collateral heir, the dynasty would have ended. Yet Ibrahim came to power after a life isolated from government and shadowed by his brother's executions. His dependence upon Kosum Sultan, servants, ministers, and favorites reflected the political education denied to confined princes. Ibrahim produced several sons, rebuilding the dynasty's male reserve. His reign, however, ended in crisis. In 1648, officials, religious authorities, janissaries, and palace figures deposed him. He was strangled soon afterward, while his son Mehmed IV became sultan before his 7th birthday. The throne passed to another generation, but the ruler was again a child. His grandmother Kosum Sultan and his mother Turhan Sultan became central figures around the young court. The Ottomans had not ended fratricide through one humane decision. Between Ahmed's accession and Ibrahim's death, they spared brothers, killed brothers, enthroned an uncle, restored a deposed sultan, murdered another, and repeatedly crowned children. From that experimentation emerged a compromise. Seniority preserved multiple male heirs, while confinement prevented provincial armies. The dynasty gained protection against extinction, but future sultans often arrived without administrative experience and depended heavily on court factions. The cage kept princes alive. It could not prepare them to rule, and whether it produced greater stability remained to be tested. In 1687, rebellion within the Ottoman army forced Mehmed IV from the throne. Yet his removal did not send his sons into a war for succession. The court instead elevated his younger brother, Suleiman II, who had spent nearly 4 decades confined inside the imperial palace. He was already in his 40s and had never governed a province. The moment revealed both the achievement and the weakness of the new system. The dynasty possessed a living replacement, but its replacement had been deliberately denied political experience. Seniority had not emerged from a single statute. It developed through repeated decisions to preserve male members of the House of Osman and favor the eldest eligible prince. Palace confinement prevented princes from assembling provincial households and armies like the sons of Bayezid I. It also meant that a deposed or deceased ruler could be replaced without risking the dynasty's extinction. Suleiman was followed by his brother Ahmed II, and later successions passed among brothers, uncles, and nephews. This arrangement changed where political power operated. Grand viziers, senior officials, mothers of reigning sultans, religious authorities, and military commanders acquired greater influence in moments of accession and deposition. The prince waiting inside the palace possessed a dynastic claim, but rarely an independent power base. Competition therefore continued through court alliances, military revolts, and struggles over ministerial office. Deposition increasingly performed part of the function once served by a victorious brother. It removed a ruler without dividing the empire among rival Ottoman princes. That did not make succession peaceful in every case, and confinement carried serious costs. Some princes remained isolated for years, uncertain whether the next summons announced a coronation or an execution. A new sultan could reach the throne with little knowledge of administration, warfare, or the provinces. Dependence on experienced ministers was not automatically disastrous, but it made rule more vulnerable to palace factions. The cage preserved potential sovereigns as dynastic insurance. It could not guarantee that they were prepared to exercise sovereignty. The older logic returned with violence in 1808. Selim III had been deposed after opposition to his military reforms, and Mustafa IV occupied the throne. When forces led by Alamdar Mustafa Pasha entered Istanbul intending to restore Selim, Mustafa ordered the elimination of both Selim and his brother Prince Mahmud. Selim was killed. Mahmud escaped and survived. He was enthroned as Mahmud II, while Mustafa was deposed and later executed on Mahmud's order after another revolt threatened restoration. The crisis was a final, unmistakable echo of preventive fratricide. Mustafa tried to make himself indispensable by becoming the only surviving man of the dynasty. His failure demonstrated why seniority required spare heirs, even while the violence surrounding Mahmud's accession showed that no rule could remove political conflict. What had changed was the usual outcome. The empire no longer expected every accession to end with the routine strangling of all younger brothers. In 1876, Article 3 of the First Ottoman Constitution gave the principle formal expression. Sovereignty belonged to the eldest prince of the House of Osman under the dynasty's established rules. The constitution did not eliminate coups or depositions, but it made seniority the recognized answer to the succession question. In the empire's final decades, Abdulhamid II succeeded his brother Murad V, Mehmed V succeeded Abdul Hamid, and Mehmed VI succeeded his brother Mehmed V. These transfers occurred amid severe political crises, yet none became a territorial war among royal brothers. The contrast clarifies what fratricide actually accomplished. It solved a genuine and sometimes catastrophic problem in the short term. A sultan who killed his brothers could remove alternative centers of dynastic legitimacy and reduce the danger of immediate partition. But killing rivals did not eliminate rivalry. It moved competition into the palace, the provincial households, the army, and the family of the reigning sultan. Seniority made the dynasty harder to extinguish, but transferred greater power to the institutions and factions capable of enthroning, directing, or deposing an inexperienced prince. Neither system explains why Ottoman rule endured for more than 6 centuries. Military organization, taxation, provincial administration, diplomacy, religious and dynastic legitimacy, and the capacity to revise institutions were more important than any single succession practice. Fratricide helped certain sultans secure power. Adaptation helped the state survive the consequences. After defeat in World War I, however, the central struggle was no longer between Ottoman princes. Allied occupation, territorial loss, and the nationalist government based in Ankara deprived Mehmed VI of effective authority. On November 1, 1922, the Grand National Assembly abolished the Sultanate. Abdülmecid II retained the title of Caliph without becoming Sultan or recovering temporal rule. On March 3, 1924, the Caliphate was abolished, and the members of the Ottoman Dynasty were sent into exile. The ending returns to January of 1595. Mehmed III gained a throne without direct rivals by ordering the death of 19 half-brothers. Only 8 years later, the male line had become so fragile that his successor spared the last surviving brother. Fratricide offered certainty to one sultan. Seniority offered continuity to the dynasty. In the end, the House of Osman did not fall because a brother captured the throne, or because the family ran out of princes. It fell when the state that emerged from war no longer accepted the family's right to rule.